This lesson is going to be on how to solve proportions. A proportion is an equation stating that the values of two ratios are equivalent. In math, when we're talking about equivalent is just another word to mean equal. So an example would be 2/4 as a ratio. 2 to 4 is equal to 1 to 2. A few different ways we can determine that these are equal. The first way is I could reduce 2/4 to 1/2 and see that 1/2 is equal to 1/2. Another way to determine that these two ratios are equal is to see what I can multiply or divide both numbers by to get the new number. So I know 2 times 2 is 4, and 1 times 2 is 2. So since I multiply by the same number, these two ratios are equivalent. And a third way to determine if your two ratios are equivalent is to cross multiply. Cross multiply, you're just making a cross and multiplying. So 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 2 is also 4. So since I got the same number, these two ratios would be equal, so this would be a proportion. Now we're going to solve a proportion for a missing number. Two ways to do this. The first way is to see what number you can multiply by one ratio to get the other numbers. So I noticed that 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm going to do the same thing to the numerator and do 3 times 4 and get 12. So x would be equal to 12. The second way to do it, which will work every time even if you don't know the number, is to cross multiply. So I have 3 over 2 is equal to x over 8. If I cross multiply, 2 times x is 2x. 3 times 8 is 24. And then I divide both sides by 2, and I get x is equal to 12. So I get the same answer both times. Solve another proportion. This time, I don't know what I have to multiply 10 by to get me to 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply. 8 times 7 is 56. 10 times x is 10x. I divide both sides by 10. 56 divided by 10 is 5.6. So 5.6 would be equal to x. We can also use proportion to solve word problems. Sarah's favorite cookie recipe calls for 1.5 cups of sugar to make 12 cookies. How much sugar does she need to make 36 cookies? I'm going to set up a proportion, but when you're setting it up, you have to make sure that the numbers are staying together, that go together. So I'm going to do the sugar, the amount of sugar in the numerator of my ratio over the amount of cookies. For her first recipe, it's 1.5 cups of sugar to make 12 cookies. And now I'm going to use the other recipe for my second ratio. So the sugar is what we don't know, so I'll call that x. And the cookies is 36. I notice 12 times 3 is 36. So I can do 1.5 times 3 to get 4.5. So 4.5 is x. So it would be 4.5 cups of sugar. If I wanted to solve this by cross multiplying, I still have my same ratio that are equal, and I cross multiply. 12 times x is 12x. 36 times 1.5 is 54. And when I divide both sides by 12, I get x equals 4.5, which is the same answer. And the last problem. The relationship between x and y is proportional. When x is 3, y is 51. What is x when y is 204? I'm going to solve this by setting up a proportion to practice. My proportion is going to be x over y. If you did it the other way, it'd still get you the same answer. For my first ratio, my x is 3 and y is 51. And for my second ratio, x is what we don't know, so I'll just label it as x, and 204 is y. I can just cross multiply. 51x is equal to 204 times 3, which is 612. Divide both sides by 51, and x is equal to 12.